My name is Emily Carter, and I'm 29 years old. 3 weeks ago, I stood beneath the towering cedar trees outside my grandmother's home on Mercer Island, Washington, staring at the rideshare car that had just pulled away. The driveway was already crowded with SUVs, pickup trucks, and luxury sedans belonging to relatives who had gathered to celebrate my grandmother's 76th birthday. Before I could even reach the front porch, Grandma Evelyn smiled warmly and asked, "Emily, sweetheart, why did you come in a lift? Where's the Volvo your grandfather bought for you?" For a split second, I couldn't answer. My mother stepped in immediately. "Oh, Mom," she laughed loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Emily let Rachel use it. You know Emily, she's always putting family first." Several relatives nodded with approving smiles. I simply looked at my grandmother. She didn't smile back. Instead, she quietly studied my face for several long seconds before giving the smallest nod. At that moment, I realized something. She already knew. What nobody standing on that porch knew was that my grandmother had spent nearly 5 hours at the Washington Department of Licensing earlier that morning. Inside the leather portfolio resting beneath her arm was a collection of certified records, copies of ownership documents, handwritten notes, and a timeline she'd been building for almost 6 months. She hadn't invited everyone here just to celebrate a birthday. She had invited witnesses. My family has lived around the Seattle area for generations. Grandma Evelyn still lives in the beautiful waterfront home overlooking Lake Washington that she and Grandpa built together in the early 1980s. After Grandpa passed away 3 years ago, everyone expected her to move closer to my parents. She refused. "I've built my life here," she'd said. "So this is where I'll finish it." My parents live in Bellevue, about 30 minutes away. My older sister, Rachel, lives nearby in Sammamish with her husband Tyler and their 2 children. Tyler works as a finance manager at one of the largest luxury dealerships in King County. Rachel stays home with the kids. I live alone in downtown Seattle. I'm a cybersecurity engineer for a cloud security company. I bought my own condo 2 years ago. I pay every bill myself. Most evenings it's just me, homemade dinner, and my laptop. My mother often tells people how independent I am. People think that's a compliment. In my family, it meant something entirely different. It meant I was the daughter expected to sacrifice first. Whenever Rachel needed help, everyone somehow assumed I'd understand. For 29 years. I always did. Until the day my car disappeared. The Volvo wasn't just another car. It was the last gift my grandfather ever planned for me. On my 25th birthday, Grandma Evelyn invited me to dinner at a quiet seafood restaurant overlooking Elliott Bay. It had always been Grandpa's favorite place whenever they visited Seattle. After dessert, she smiled and said, "Come outside. There's something your grandfather wanted you to have." Parked beneath the streetlights was a silver Volvo XC60, wrapped with a blue ribbon. I stood frozen. Grandpa had ordered it months before his illness became serious. He never lived long enough to hand me the keys himself. Grandma placed them gently into my palm. "He wanted you to have something dependable," she whispered. "He always said you'd build your own life, and he wanted you to have a safe way to drive wherever that life took you." I cried. Grandma didn't. Instead, she quietly opened the worn leather portfolio she always carried and wrote something on one of its neatly labeled pages. After Grandpa passed away, she'd taken over every family record. Receipts. Property documents. Loans. Large gifts. Anything involving money or ownership was carefully documented in her precise handwriting. At the time, I thought she was simply organized. Years later, I'd understand why. A week after receiving the Volvo, my parents invited everyone over for Sunday dinner. Halfway through dessert, my mother casually turned toward me. "Emily, honey. Since the car is brand new, it might be safer if I keep the original title with our insurance paperwork." I looked up. "What do you mean?" "You know, just in case anything happens." She smiled reassuringly. We have a safe at the house. Fires, theft, accidents, it's better protected there. I was 25. I trusted my mother. Sure, I answered. If you think that's best. She squeezed my hand. I knew you'd understand. Back then. I didn't realize those 4 words had become her favorite weapon. Rachel is 2 years older than I am. She married Tyler 6 years ago in a beautiful winery outside Woodinville. My parents paid for most of the wedding. I helped organize nearly every detail. Rachel often joked that planning wasn't her strength. So I happily spent evenings making phone calls, comparing vendors, and fixing problems no one else wanted to deal with. After their first child was born, Rachel stopped working. Tyler earned enough to keep the family comfortable, but money was always tight. At least, that's what everyone kept saying. Whenever Rachel wanted something bigger. A newer stroller. A remodeled kitchen. A vacation. A newer vehicle. The conversation somehow ended with the same sentence. Emily doesn't really need as much. And my mother always added another. You're single. You can be flexible. I heard those words so often they almost stopped hurting. Almost. The older I became, the more invisible my own accomplishments seemed. When I graduated from the University of Washington with honors, Rachel's toddler had a fever. My parents skipped the ceremony. When I bought my first condo, my mother congratulated me for less than 30 seconds before explaining that Rachel was struggling with daycare costs. When I received a promotion that nearly doubled my salary, she smiled proudly. Then immediately asked whether I could help Rachel with a down payment on a new SUV. Every milestone in my life somehow became another reason I was expected to give something away. And every single time, I said yes. Because that's what the easy daughter was supposed to do. 6 months before Grandma Evelyn's birthday, my mother invited me over for what she called a quiet family lunch. Just the 2 of us. No Rachel. That should have been my first warning. We sat on the back patio overlooking her carefully landscaped garden in Bellevue. She talked almost the entire meal about houses she'd recently sold, clients moving to Seattle, and how competitive the market had become. Dad barely spoke. He rarely did whenever Mom controlled the conversation. As we finished coffee, she casually asked, Emily, could you email me a copy of your vehicle registration? I need to update the umbrella insurance policy. I don't have it with me. She waved her hand dismissively. That's okay. I still have the paperwork in the safe. I nodded without thinking. Whatever's easiest. She scribbled something onto her yellow legal pad. Then she looked up. Just remind me, your full legal name and birthday. I laughed. You know both. I do, she smiled. I just want to double-check everything. Without giving it another thought, I answered. After lunch she handed me what she claimed was a copy of my vehicle title. You should keep one, too. I slipped the folded paper into my purse without opening it. When I got home, I tossed it into the glove compartment of my Volvo. I wouldn't look at it again for almost 5 months. 3 weeks before Grandma's birthday, my Volvo had supposedly been in the dealership service department for nearly 3 months. At least. That's what my mother kept telling me. Every time I asked whether it was ready, she'd sigh dramatically. They're waiting on another part. Supply delays. Modern cars are impossible to fix these days. Meanwhile, I had been taking lifts everywhere. To work. To the airport. To dinner with friends. I never questioned it. Why would I? I trusted my own family. That Saturday I drove to Rachel's house to drop off a birthday present for my niece. As I pulled into the driveway, something immediately caught my eye. A silver Volvo XC60. My Volvo. For a moment I convinced myself I was mistaken. Maybe another family owned the exact same model. Then I saw the small scratch near the rear bumper. I'd made it myself 2 years earlier while backing into my condo's parking garage. There was no mistake. It was mine. Children's car seats filled the back seats. Rachel was unloading groceries from the trunk. She smiled as though nothing in the world was unusual. "Oh, hey." I stared at the car. "Rachel?" She glanced toward it. "Oh." She laughed awkwardly. "Mom didn't tell you?" "Tell me what?" "That we switched cars." I felt every muscle in my body tighten. "Switched?" She shrugged. "Tyler arranged everything through his dealership." "Mom said you were completely okay with it." I didn't answer. Rachel kept talking. "You barely drive. We have the kids." This just made more sense. As though she were explaining why she'd borrowed a sweater. Not someone else's vehicle. Not something worth tens of thousands of dollars. She smiled again. "Want some coffee?" I looked at my own keys in my hand. They no longer unlocked the car sitting 10 feet away. "No." I handed my niece's birthday gift to Rachel. Turned around. Walked back to the lift waiting at the curb. The entire 40-minute ride back to Seattle. I didn't say a single word. That evening, at exactly 7:12 p.m., I called my mother. She answered on the second ring. "Hi, sweetheart." Her cheerful voice sounded rehearsed. I didn't waste time. "Why is my Volvo parked in Rachel's driveway?" Silence. Barely half a second. Long enough for her to prepare an answer. "Oh. I was going to tell you. Rachel needs it more." There it was. The same sentence. Again. "Mom. That car belongs to me." "Honey," she replied patiently, "you're single. Rachel has 2 children. Tyler's schedule is crazy." It was simply the practical choice. "I never agreed to this." "Of course you did." "No, I didn't. We handled all the paperwork months ago." My heart skipped. "What paperwork?" "The ownership transfer." "I signed nothing." Another pause. Then her voice became firmer. "Emily. You've been so busy with work that you've probably forgotten." "I haven't forgotten. I never signed anything." She sighed loudly. "Please don't start unnecessary drama before your grandmother's birthday." Then she added quietly. "Don't embarrass the family over a car." The call ended. I sat alone in my condo staring at the folded title copy I'd finally taken out of my glove compartment. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. For the first time in my life. I wondered whether my own mother had lied to me. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard my mother's words. "Rachel needs it more." By Sunday morning, I needed answers. Not excuses. Answers. I called my father. He answered from the backyard. "Morning, kiddo." "Dad, did you ever see me sign paperwork transferring my Volvo to Rachel?" Silence. Finally, he sighed. "No." My stomach tightened. "Your mother handled everything," he admitted. "She told me you'd agreed." "I never did." "I know." For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then he quietly added. "Your grandmother has been asking questions." "What kind of questions?" "About the title, and who processed the transfer." "What did Mom tell her?" "That you signed everything yourself." "And Grandma?" "She went quiet." That worried me more than if she'd been angry. Grandma Evelyn never argued. She investigated. Monday morning I returned to work in Seattle, but I couldn't focus. My coworker Olivia Brooks noticed immediately. "You look exhausted." At lunch I told her everything. She listened carefully before asking one simple question. "Have you checked the Washington Department of Licensing records?" I frowned. No. You should. It'll tell you exactly who owns the vehicle. I stared at her. I didn't even know I could do that. Olivia shook her head. Emily, if someone claimed they'd used your employee account, you'd check the system logs immediately. So why are you trusting people instead of checking the records? Her words stayed with me all afternoon. That evening I searched for the Washington DOL website. The ownership request page appeared. My cursor hovered over the button. I couldn't click it. Part of me still hoped Mom was telling the truth. Maybe I'd forgotten. Maybe there had been paperwork. Maybe. I closed the laptop. The next evening my phone rang. Grandma. Emily, are you coming Saturday? Of course. She paused. Your mother says you gave Rachel your Volvo. I looked out the apartment window. It's complicated. Grandma didn't question me. Instead she said, bring every document you have. The title. Any purchase papers. Everything. Why? I've been organizing your grandfather's records. I'd like to compare them. I heard pages turning inside her leather portfolio. Then the sound of her pen writing another note. She wasn't making assumptions anymore. She was collecting evidence. Before hanging up, she quietly added. And Emily. Don't worry. The truth always leaves a trail. For the first time in days. I believed her. The next morning, I couldn't avoid it any longer. Before work, I opened my laptop, took a deep breath, and submitted a request through the Washington Department of Licensing. A few minutes later, the record appeared. I read it once. Then again. And again. Registered owner, Rachel Carter Sullivan. Transfer date, March 18th. I felt the room spin. According to the state of Washington, I no longer owned my own car. My hands were shaking as I opened the scanned title transfer. There it was. My name. My signature. Except. It wasn't mine. At first glance it looked convincing. But the longer I stared, the more mistakes I noticed. My real signature always began with a sharp capital E. The one on the document had a rounded loop. Even my middle initial was written differently. Someone had copied my name. But not my handwriting. Just as I was trying to process everything, my phone buzzed. Dad. I just sent you an email, he said quietly. Check it. What is it? Proof. I opened my inbox. There were 4 attachments. A boarding pass. A hotel receipt. A conference schedule. And a photograph of me speaking on stage. The dates stopped me cold. March 17th through March 19th. Portland, Oregon. I remembered that trip perfectly. Our company had sent me to a cybersecurity conference, and on March 18th, I gave a presentation about cloud security. I looked back at the title transfer. According to the dealership, that was the exact same day I had supposedly signed away my Volvo in Bellevue. It was impossible. I had been nearly 200 miles away. I called Dad immediately. You knew? I suspected. Why didn't you tell me sooner? He sighed. I wanted to be certain. Your grandmother told me not to accuse anyone until we had proof. My heart skipped. Grandma knows? I don't know everything she's doing, he admitted. But she's been gathering documents for weeks. That evening I printed every record. The ownership report. The title transfer. The conference documents. The boarding pass. I placed everything into a folder. Then I remembered Grandma's words. Bring every document you have. For the first time, I understood why. She wasn't asking out of curiosity. She already knew something was terribly wrong. She just needed the final pieces. As I closed the folder, my phone lit up once more. A message from Rachel. Please don't make things awkward at Grandma's birthday. She deserves one peaceful day. I stared at the screen. For the first time in my life. I didn't answer. Saturday morning arrived gray and rainy, the kind of weather Seattle wore so often it almost felt comforting. At exactly 9:15 a.m., my apartment buzzer rang. I looked at the security camera. Grandma Evelyn stood in the hallway, wearing her navy raincoat and holding the same worn leather portfolio she'd carried for years. She hadn't called first. She simply came. I let her in. I hope you still have coffee, she said with a small smile. I do. While I prepared 2 mugs, she walked slowly around my condo, stopping for a moment to admire the view of Puget Sound through the windows. Then she sat at my kitchen table. She wrapped both hands around the warm mug before looking directly into my eyes. Emily, she said softly, I'm only going to ask you one question. I nodded. Did you ever sign the paperwork transferring your Volvo to Rachel? There wasn't even a second of hesitation. No. Her expression didn't change. She simply nodded once. I believed that would be your answer. She placed her coffee on the table and slowly opened the leather portfolio. Inside were neatly organized folders separated by handwritten tabs. She turned several pages before stopping at one marked simply Volvo. She didn't let me read the documents. Instead, she closed the portfolio again. I've spent the last several weeks checking every record your grandfather and I kept. She smiled faintly. He always believed that paper tells the truth, even when people don't. I felt tears forming in my eyes. So, you know. I know enough. Grandma reached across the table and gently placed her hand over mine. I need you to trust me. I do. When we arrive at my birthday party today, you are not going to argue with anyone. I frowned. Not even Mom? Especially not your mother. What if she lies? Grandma's eyes softened. She will. What if Rachel says the car is hers? She probably will. I took a deep breath. Then what do I do? You answer only the questions I ask you. And nothing else. She stood and picked up her portfolio. One more thing. Yes? Don't drive. I blinked. My car. I know. She smiled knowingly. Order a lift. I want everyone to see you arrive without the Volvo. I looked at her in confusion. Why? She opened the apartment door. Because sometimes the truth needs an audience. Then she stepped into the hallway. Just before the elevator doors closed, she looked back at me. Trust me, Emily. I've been waiting a long time for today. The elevator disappeared. I stood there in complete silence. For the first time since this nightmare had begun. I wasn't afraid anymore. At 5:08 p.m., the lift turned into Grandma Evelyn's long driveway on Mercer Island. Luxury SUVs and pickup trucks lined both sides of the road. Nearly every member of the family had already arrived. I paid the driver, stepped out into the cool evening air, and watched the car disappear around the corner. The moment I reached the front porch, my cousin Megan smiled. Emily. Where's your Volvo? I forced a small smile. Long story. Inside, the house was filled with laughter, music, and the smell of fresh salmon and cedar plank barbecue. Rachel stood near the dining room with Tyler, laughing with several relatives. Through the front window. I saw it. My silver Volvo. Parked in the place of honor at the front of the driveway. As though it had always belonged there. Before I could take another step, my mother hurried toward me. There you are, she said loudly, wrapping me in a quick hug. I was beginning to worry. Then Grandma Evelyn walked out from the kitchen. The conversations around the room slowly faded. She crossed the foyer without rushing. The leather portfolio rested beneath her arm. She stopped directly in front of me. Her voice was calm, clear enough for everyone nearby to hear. Emily, sweetheart. Why did you arrive in a lift? What happened to the Volvo your grandfather bought you? The entire room became silent. I opened my mouth, but my mother answered first. Oh, Mom, she laughed. Emily let Rachel have it. You know how generous she is. Rachel has 2 children. It just made more sense. Several relatives nodded. Aunt Linda even smiled proudly. That's so thoughtful of you, Emily. I looked only at Grandma. She never took her eyes off me. Then she asked quietly. Is that true? Every heartbeat felt louder than the last. I remembered exactly what she'd told me that morning. Answer only the questions I ask. I took one slow breath. Then I said. No, Grandma. Nothing else. Just 2 words. The room froze. My mother's smile disappeared for only a fraction of a second before returning. Emily. She said softly. Maybe you're nervous. We talked about this months ago. I didn't even turn toward her. Grandma repeated the question. You did not give Rachel your Volvo? I met her eyes. No. I did not. For several long seconds. No one moved. Then Grandma slowly turned toward Rachel. Rachel, dear. Would you mind handing me the keys to the Volvo? Rachel looked at Mom. Then at Tyler. Neither of them spoke. Finally, Tyler reached into his pocket and pulled out the key fob. He handed it to Grandma with a nervous smile. Here you go. Grandma accepted it without looking down. Instead of returning it, she quietly slipped the keys into the pocket of her cardigan. Then she looked directly at Tyler. Tyler. You still work as finance manager at Evergreen Luxury Motors. Correct? He swallowed. Yes, ma'am. And your dealership processed the transfer of this vehicle? Tyler hesitated. Yes. Grandma nodded once. I thought so. Without another word, she placed her leather portfolio on the hallway table. Then she slowly unfastened the brass clasp. The sound echoed through the silent house. Everyone watched. No one spoke. Because somehow, every person in that room knew. The birthday party was over. Something much bigger had just begun. Grandma Evelyn rested the leather portfolio on the hallway table. Without a word, she opened the brass clasp. Inside were several neatly organized folders. She pulled out 2 certified documents and held them side by side. This, she said, raising the first page, is the original title issued when Harold and I purchased the Volvo for Emily. She lifted the second document. And this is the ownership transfer processed 4 months ago. No one spoke. Grandma looked directly at my mother. Melissa. Would you please compare the signatures? Mom barely glanced at the papers. They're the same. Grandma didn't react. Instead, she handed both documents to Uncle David, a retired attorney. David. Please. He adjusted his glasses and studied both pages carefully. Nearly a minute passed. Finally, he looked up. They're different. The room fell silent again. The letters don't match, he continued. The spacing is different. And whoever signed the second document writes their capital E completely differently. Mom crossed her arms. People's signatures change. Grandma calmly nodded. They can. But not while they're giving a presentation in another state. Several heads turned toward me. Mom frowned. What are you talking about? Grandma reached into the portfolio again. This time she removed 4 more documents. A boarding pass. A hotel receipt. A conference agenda. And a photograph. She handed them to Uncle David. He read each page carefully. Then he looked at everyone gathered in the room. Emily was speaking at a cybersecurity conference in Portland on the exact day this transfer was signed. He lowered the papers. She couldn't have been at a dealership in Bellevue. A quiet murmur spread through the house. Rachel's face turned pale. Tyler shifted nervously beside her. Mom tried to interrupt. There has to be some misunderstanding. Grandma gently raised one hand. No. There isn't. Then she looked directly at Tyler. You processed this transfer at your dealership. Correct? Tyler swallowed. Yes. Did you personally verify Emily's identity? He hesitated. Everyone noticed. My wife brought the paperwork, he finally answered. I assumed everything had already been signed. Grandma held his gaze. So. You never actually saw Emily. He lowered his eyes. No. Another wave of whispers moved through the room. Grandma slowly closed the folder in her hands. Then she looked at my mother. Melissa. I have one final question. The room became so quiet that I could hear the rain tapping softly against the front windows. Did you sign your daughter's name? Mom's face lost all color. She opened her mouth. But no words came out. For several seconds, my mother said nothing. She looked from Grandma to the documents. Then to the 40 relatives standing silently in the foyer. Finally, she whispered. I was only trying to help my family. Grandma didn't raise her voice. You mean Rachel? Mom's eyes filled with tears. She has 2 children. They were struggling. Emily has a great career. She could afford another car. I felt something inside me finally break. Not because of what she'd said. Because she truly believed it justified everything. Grandma folded her hands calmly. Melissa. Being successful does not make your daughter responsible for everyone else's life. Mom shook her head desperately. You don't understand. No, Grandma replied softly. I understand perfectly. You stole from one granddaughter to reward another. The room fell completely silent. Rachel finally spoke. I didn't know. Her voice trembled. I thought Emily had agreed. I looked at her. Did you ever ask me? Rachel couldn't answer. Instead, she lowered her eyes. Tyler stood beside her, staring at the floor. Grandma opened the portfolio once more. This wasn't the first place I visited yesterday. Everyone looked at her. I met with my attorney before sunrise. She removed another folder. Inside was a letter printed on legal stationery. I also met with investigators from the Washington Department of Licensing. My mother's face turned pale. Grandma continued calmly. They already have certified copies of every document. The signatures. The transfer records. The dealership information. And Emily's conference records. She paused. The investigation officially began yesterday morning. A gasp spread through the room. Tyler's shoulders dropped. You already reported it? Yes. Grandma answered without hesitation. I wasn't willing to wait another day. Then she reached into her cardigan pocket. Everyone watched as she removed the Volvo key fob. She walked toward me. Without saying a word, she placed it in my hand. This car has always belonged to you. I looked at the keys. I've already arranged for the title to be restored once the investigation is complete. She smiled gently. And this time, you'll keep every original document yourself. I felt tears burning my eyes. Thank you. Grandma squeezed my hand. I'm only finishing what your grandfather started. She turned back toward the family one final time. There is one more announcement. Every face in the room lifted. My attorney completed the revision of my estate plan this week. Mom stared at her. What? Grandma's voice remained calm. From this day forward, no member of this family will have authority over my finances, property, or legal documents. Every decision will go directly through my attorney. She looked directly at my mother. And the authority I entrusted to you after your father's death has been permanently revoked. Mom's knees nearly gave way. You can't do this. Grandma met her eyes. I already have. No one spoke. Outside, rain continued falling softly over Lake Washington. Inside, the entire family realized that nothing would ever be the same again. 3 weeks later, life looked very different. The investigation by the Washington Department of Licensing moved faster than anyone expected. Tyler was placed on administrative leave while investigators reviewed the paperwork processed through his dealership. Within days, Evergreen Luxury Motors completed its internal audit. The results were clear. The transfer had been approved without verifying my identity. 2 weeks later, Tyler lost his job. He called me once. I never answered. There was nothing left to say. Rachel returned the Volvo to Grandma's garage the morning after the birthday party. She didn't knock. She simply left the keys in the mailbox. A week later, Grandma called. Emily, your new title is ready. When I arrived at her house, she was waiting in the driveway. The Volvo looked exactly as I remembered. Clean. Polished. Waiting for me. Grandma handed me a large envelope. Inside was a brand new certificate of title. One name. Emily Carter. No co-owner. No family trustee. No shared insurance policy. Just me. Exactly as Grandpa had intended. We sat together on her back porch overlooking Lake Washington. For a long time neither of us spoke. Finally I asked the question that had been on my mind since the birthday party. Grandma, why did you wait so long? She stared across the water before answering. Because I kept hoping your mother would do the right thing. She smiled sadly. Your grandfather believed people should always be given the chance to correct their mistakes. And when they don't? I asked. Then you protect the innocent. She reached over and gently squeezed my hand. I should have protected you years ago. I saw the way your mother treated you. I saw how every sacrifice became your responsibility. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. She lowered her eyes. I was wrong. A tear rolled down my cheek. You stepped in when it mattered. She smiled. I wish I had done it sooner. Before I left, Grandma walked me to the Volvo. She placed the keys into my hand one last time. Your grandfather used to say something. I smiled. What was it? She looked directly at me. Real family never asks you to earn your place. I swallowed hard. I finally understand. She nodded. I know. That evening I drove back to Seattle. The sun was setting behind the Olympic Mountains. For the first time in months, I felt peaceful. Not because I had won. Not because someone else had lost. But because the truth no longer needed defending. It had already spoken for itself. As I pulled into my condo garage, I looked at the key resting in my hand. It wasn't just the key to a car. It was proof that sometimes the greatest gift a family can give you isn't money. It isn't an inheritance. It's finally choosing to stand beside you when the truth matters most.